Alrighty, so I'm here with Keith Campbell. We are going to talk about a lot of different things. Sounds like I don't have an agenda for this, partially because I watched your lectures on Peterson Academy, and it seemed like you're a person who could just kind of go off on all these different directions and talk about different things. So I just thought I'm just going to keep it open-ended, and we'll talk about whatever. I watched your lectures on narcissism, and maybe I guess I'll open up. Well, let's open up. I guess I should let you introduce yourself. So tell people about who you are, what you've done, that sort of thing.
My name is Keith Campbell, sometimes known as W. Keith Campbell, because there's a lot of us Keith Campbells out there, including many more famous than I. And I'm a psychologist. I'm mostly a social personality psychologist. I'm not a clinician, which I like to say to people. So I'm not giving clinical advice. I'm a professor at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, where I've been for 25 years. And I study narcissism, the self, did a little work on ayahuasca. I study wealth, but primarily just how the self works in and trying to figure out the human condition and largely failing for 25 years. And written some books. I write a Substack now to try to keep myself busy, that kind of thing.
That's sweet. Yeah, I've read a couple of your Substack posts. Maybe we could just start with what we were talking about beforehand, because that's interesting. You say you read scripture, and did you read Jordan Peterson's book, We Who Wrestle with God?
No, I have a lovely copy of it, and I haven't read it yet. It's sitting out there.
Because, man, you should read it and just let me know what you think about it, because I finished that a while back, and I thought he had a chapter on the Tower of Babel that was the best explanation of Babel that I ever heard in my life. And I'm reading a lot of theologians, and he figured it out, and none of these guys did. So that was interesting to me. But yeah, I just like to hear what you have to say.
That's really interesting. That will be on the list.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, I had two things. I had two thoughts to begin this with. So when I was listening to your lectures on narcissism, and we can just talk a little bit about what narcissism is and things like that. But when I finished the lectures, I got to the end of it, and as you described what narcissism actually is, there were two groups of people in society that came into my head that felt like they sort of encapsulated the two different types of narcissism: grandiose and
vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you tell me if this is a correct analysis.
Yeah,
this will be
let's
interesting. The grandiose, I felt like a lot of megachurch pastors fit in that category. And then vulnerable, I felt like social workers fit in that category.
Oh, that's interesting.
So what do you think of? Let's just start there.
I'll tell you, I hate pointing fingers at people, and so just bear with me. I'm not trying to be too mean, but what we see with the data, looking at pastors, and there's a big study out of Canada, is that the greater the narcissism of the pastor or church leader, the larger the church, the larger the congregation.
Wow.
And this makes a lot of sense to me, because people who are narcissistic want attention, they want status, they want adulation and adoration, and they have the skills, the charisma, the extroversion that sort of works for it. So they'd naturally gravitate to sort of a bigger, more productive, more of a production for church. Then what happens is you take a normal, traditional service where this gets kind of muted down. So in a traditional service, you can't break the rules too much. But if you move into, mega churches, like an American mega church, like we have here in Athens, my sister, non-denominational mega churches. So my experience has been going to a large one in Orange County, California. My sister went to, we called Disneyland, and we would go there, and they had, it was, they had the rock band and everybody waving. But if you didn't want to be in the church, you could go to the coffee shop and watch it on TV in the coffee shop at the church. And if you wanted more of a chapel, you could go to the chapel and watch it on a screen, or you could go to the skate park and just skateboard.
That's great.
I thought it was wonderful. I mean, it's very entertaining. It works. It's very successful. If you're a narcissistic guy and you want to run a church, that's the kind of church you're going to run.
Right.
Because you can build huge followings. It's like building a large business, and you get a lot of attention and a lot of adulation doing it. So I think I'm not saying everybody running a mega church is somehow narcissistic. I'm just saying that's natural flow of people that have bigger egos to those sort of bigger ego churches.
I think that's it. Well, that's interesting because one, as I listened through the lectures, at times it seemed like narcissism is really bad, but I never got the like moral. That's like I'm like black and white I'm like a conservative. I want to know if it's a good or bad. But with narcissism, I never got the sense that sometimes it seemed like it could be good. Like I thought of like Winston Churchill. He probably was narcissistic, but we needed him really badly. And if we didn't have a narcissist, we would probably all be dead. In that position, who was like so believing in his own vision and what he thought was true. And like we needed that. And then on the other hand, the megachurch thing, like that gets into theological questions about like, what's the church for? Is it for playgrounds and skate parks? And my position is like, no, it's not for that. So then it's like, well, that looks bad. So like maybe, okay, step back and explain what narcissism is and whether it's good or bad or like.
Thank you for that. My message came across that I'm not trying to be a moral arbiter, if that's the right word. As I'm an academic, I'm trying to explain reality. I'm not trying to tell people what to believe. I know that kind of got lost in the shuffle over the last 15 years in academia, but in the old days, we were supposed to be honest and try to tell people, the whole range of reality and let people think.
Right.
So I try to do that with narcissism, and I generally view everything, at least from the start, as a trade-off. There's upsides and downsides to it. Now, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's really narcissistic or you got a boss, you're going to say it's only bad. Well, it is for you. But from their perspective, the narcissism is usually a bit of a trade-off. And I guess I should define what the heck we're talking about first, just to step back for 1 second. So when I'm saying narcissism, most simply, it's having an inflated view of yourself. You think you're better than you are. You think you're a 9 and you're a 6 or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And because of that, you have to sort of use your social relationships to keep that self inflated. And there's a couple ways this happens. One, in the more grandiose side, are people that are extroverted and confident and naturally make good leaders, are able to go out into the world, gain positive attention. Maybe they get fancy cars. Maybe they start a mega church. Maybe they act with confidence. Maybe they have a confident voice. They're very good speaking in groups, very good at meeting people. Those are all benefits of, what we call grandiose narcissism. People have a very confident self-view, and they're sociable, and they use other people to maintain the self-view, but they're not necessarily nasty people unless they're challenged. As long as they're getting their needs met. Keith, you're the smartest guy ever. I'm like, I love you, man. It kind of works.
Yeah.
And so they're getting their ego needs met in this more sort of offensive, attention-seeking, status-seeking way. And then this other form of narcissism is a more defensive form we call vulnerable narcissism. There's lots of terms for this, but it's more vulnerable because you easily get overwhelmed by events. You have more neuroticism, a little more introversion. And so vulnerable narcissism is, I'm a big deal, and no one really knows that. And so I'm going to go through my life stewing and fantasizing about what a big deal I am. And occasionally, if somebody threatens or challenges that, I'll get mad. Yeah. And I'll fantasize about revenge, but I'm probably not going to do it unless I really get pushed. So it's more of a hostile stewing about not getting your attention met. Whereas with the grandiose narcissists out there kind of getting their needs met a lot of the time. Yeah. And you see the mask sort of slip when, you don't get what you want. And then you see this aggression, this anger,
Yeah, there's two. Okay, so first off, when you talk about grandiose narcissism, I remember hearing in 2016 and 2020 and 2024, Donald Trump's a narcissist, which is, I think it's like I think that's a fact now. but I never felt like that was even a good argument, because I feel like every politician's a narcissist.
Yeah, of course. Like so was LBJ, so was Nixon, so was Clinton, so was George W. Bush. Yeah. I mean, so was Andrew Jackson.
Right. And so that
kind
was
of the nature of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're picking what kind of narcissist you want to be running the country, which to me is, I mean, that's more interesting than just saying this person's a narcissist and like Joe Biden, isn't it? It's like, dude, to get to that position of power, you've got to be a narcissist. And so let's just decide which one of these is going to destroy things less than the other one, and then move forward with that. But I was always, before I even understood all the terminology, I was like, it seems like that's just kind of unfair, because everybody here is a narcissist.
Yeah, and you think about it, and I'm saying this from Georgia, you think about, haven't we had any presidents that weren't sort of self-interested monsters? Like, well, Jimmy Carter seemed like a pretty decent guy.
And he was not.
Horrible president,
He was bad,
one-termer, kind of disastrous presidency.
Right.
But our greatest, I would say our greatest ex-president.
Yeah.
That might be a bold statement, but that's what I mean about narcissism. It makes for a terrible leader sometimes, but for a good ex-president.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I should also say it also depends on the leadership system. So because we use kind of a winner take all for president, and it's more of a popularity contest, we end up with the celebrity type. So we get narcissism that way. They're TV better actors. If you use a more authoritarian systems, Russia, China, you get the narcissistic leaders because they can battle themselves to the top. So like Putin or Xi, those are tough guys, very competent, very tough guys. You look at some of the European leaders that come out of a parliament where they're really selected by their group. They're not really voted for directly. Sometimes you don't get as much narcissism in that leadership. You get more managerial personality, I think.
Interesting.
Maybe not as threatening to other people.
Right. Who like function really well in like the UN, like a big sort of bureaucratic system.
Yeah, bureaucrats. Yeah, you get bureaucrats aren't really narcissistic. They're more bureaucrats. And they're just a different personality. Very nice. Right. I've talked to bureaucrats before at big meetings. They're fun and good conversationalists. They're not doing anything.
So I guess, how do you, when you're thinking through narcissists, because it's one, by the way, it's like, I watched the videos. I was like, I'm like, I feel like I'm probably a narcissist. I know, for like a little bit here and there. And I never got the sense that it was like inherently bad or whatever. It sounds like, okay, I have a bunch of questions. One is, I heard, and I don't know if this is true at all, that men in general in the West have lost like 30% of their testosterone on average over the past 30 years. So how much is narcissism in relationship to masculinity due to the masculine feminine differences? Because I think of like my great grandfathers who went to like World War II, and they just seem different than the guys seem now. What is that?
Okay, this is really interesting, and I don't know if I have a perfect answer. One, I will start with an example. I gave a talk on narcissism. Old guy came up late. I say old guy, look at me. I mean, this guy's probably 75. Right. Could have kicked my ass. He's like, I don't know what happened, guys. They just don't know how to fight anymore.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the 70s. I grew up, I was the most effeminate guy you could imagine. I mean, I'm a psychologist. Like, guys were hardcore. And, you know, the only thing I did, anyway, I mean, it's changed dramatically. Yeah. Like, I look at men very differently than I do now. I've looked at the testosterone data and it looks like it's dropping to me. But then other people are like, well, it's really measurement and it's this and that. And I don't know what the truth is because I don't know enough about the technicalities of the data collection. And, you know, it kind of seems that way to me.
Yeah. Well, when you have conversations with men, from my perspective, I can tell the generational differences immediately. Like, I'm 26 and a lot of my friends, like, I get along with old men more, like just in friendship, because there's not so much offense taken to things. It's very strange.
It's like, it's very hard to offend me.
Yeah.
and or people go to a restaurant, they're like, do you have any allergies? I'm like, man, I was born in 66.
Right.
We didn't have allergies. It just wasn't
that
allowed.
was invented later on. Yeah.
Yeah, they invented those. And what you'll see is, if I measure grandiose narcissism with a lot of leadership component and authority in it, that's going to line up a lot with what we call psychological masculinity. So psychological masculinity, which is about agency, achievement, status seeking, leadership. It's sort of just driving reality, the agency. That lines up pretty well with grandiose narcissism. Yeah. Where you see the difference is that the narcissists are a little more self-centered, a little more selfish, maybe doing things in their own interest. And with masculinity, so I'm kind of saying, I'm doing a circumflex with my hands here. That doesn't make any sense to anybody. But narcissists are going to be a little more self-centered, a little bit. And so they're going to lose masculinity points because they're going to care about themselves more than caring about society. Okay. So, and then you go, well, what do you mean by what is a man, Keith? When I've talked to people, so I remember talking to Roy Baumeister about this because he thought a lot about it once. I said, Roy, you got a definition? He goes, when I looked at everything in anthropology, I think if you're contributing more to your society than you're taking, that's a pretty good marker of masculinity for a male.
Interesting. Wow.
Sort of like you're contributing more than you're taking. So if I see somebody who's sort of self-centered as a leader who's like exploiting people, I'm like, dude, that's not really masculine. You're just being a predator. Like, we should just put you down. That's not male. You're not a caregiver. You're not a protector. Right. You're an exploiter. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. And I imagine that men have different types of, like, the worst type of man, like you're just saying, is become an exploitative predator. Yeah. Whereas women aren't going to do that. They're going to ruin people's reputations, which Peterson has talked about a lot. So it moves in different directions. So basically, and I'll let you keep talking, but it feels like a narcissist should be governed by some sort of moral virtue system.
Very much. So sure. If you lack that sort of general, I care about people, you need a moral system that's going to force you to do it. Yeah. And so I see these guys that are sort of wired to be very narcissistic, but they're decent people. They're being pro-social. They're helping the world because they're operating from a system where you have to do these pro-social things in order to be respected in society. So the very strong moral system, I think, can control narcissism to an extent.
So do you want a society with more narcissistic men or less narcissistic men?
I think that the grandiose narcissism has two pieces to it. If you break it down, and one piece has to do with agency and confidence and ability to put yourself out there and take risks. And another piece has to do with being self-centered, thinking you're better than other people, being willing to exploit people and using people for your own well-being. Yeah. I think the first piece is positive generally for society. And generally we need people who are agentic, people willing to do things. Some of those people are going to be bad people, but in generally as society works when people are willing to take risks, do things, be agentic, want to succeed. Yeah. So I think that's the positive side primarily with narcissism. And if you have that without the antagonism and the self-centeredness, it's not narcissism. It's just agency. And so I think half of narcissism can be really beneficial. The antagonism is where you can get into trouble when that gets out of hand. Self-centeredness, the entitlement, those kind of things.
So, like, I kind of want to just take this to the bottom of things. I guess from my perspective, the greatest man that ever lived was Jesus. And so... You said you read your Bible. So, and I imagine that you psychoanalyze the Bible a little bit. So like when you're reading about Jesus as a man, how would you describe him in terms of narcissism? Like, was he grandiose narcissist, or like, how do you?
It's absolutely fascinating because on one hand, I don't, this is just talking, Jesus is a man, not jumping in anyone's theology.
Yeah.
You have to have the confidence, like, to say, I think God's coming, the world's ending, and I'm going to take on the whole Roman Empire. Like, that takes cojones. Like, you need to be pretty strong in your opinions to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So there's clearly a lot of ego strength. And then, this is what gets me about his heroism is, instead of going and slaying a dragon like all the other heroes, he literally just walks to his own death.
Yeah.
And he carries this huge burden on his back, and he breaks when he does. Like, he stumbles. And people wipe his face, and he barely made, but he keeps going, and then he keeps going. They nail him to the cross. Guy keeps, he doesn't stop. Like, that is that's like, oh my God. Like, when you think about the actual passion, that process, somebody going through that, you compare that to a mixed martial art fighter or something that you'd really look up to, or a football player that you'd look up to, or a warrior, one of these Delta Force guys, or that just went down. Those are tough sons of guns. I know some of those guys.
Yeah.
But what Jesus did was heroic in a way that's, it's very, in just the normal terms of heroism, that's heroic. And so you need a huge ego to do it, but he used that ego to sort of transform his ego, to transcend his ego. Like, he used his ego to sort of use himself up and transcend himself. Does that make any sense? I'm not a real religious guy, so I hope not. No, I hope I'm not saying crazy stuff.
No, I think that I tend to, it's very interesting because the way that through my life, Jesus has been described there's a lot of history to this, but there's like a whole movement in evangelical theology that basically, if you boiled it down, is aimed to like create sort of an effeminate Christ, and it kind of like the rest of our society. Like, that's kind of what we're doing.
I've noticed that a little bit, and I don't understand it at all.
Well, it's because they emphasize Jesus's teachings on taking care of the poor, and his love and his mercy and his kindness, which are all legitimate. Obviously, he was all those things from a Christian perspective. And they want to get rid of the tenacity that he had, the fact that he went in and flipped tables, that he drove things out of the temple with a whip, that he called the religious leaders, sons of hell and whitewashed tombs. He was a very intense person. But it's hard. Like my perspective on this is that the aim of the evangelical church, it became a massive thing in the Billy Graham era. If you know Billy Graham, the evangelist, evangelicalism and evangelism, the spreading of the message of the gospel, became like an economic machine at that point, because a ton of money started pouring in, and these churches just got massive, and they started building their institutions, which we got to talk about. You said we're moving from institutional to network. That's interesting. But anyway, that's a whole different. The universities, and which were already there, but we started building up new ones because Princeton and some of these older theological seminaries had gone so liberal in the early 1900s. And so we started building up all this stuff, Trinity International University in Chicago area, you had InterVarsity, you had all these massive institutions that got built up, and there was millions and millions, probably billions of dollars that went through these institutions. And if your institutions aren't run by people with virtue, which I think they probably were in the beginning, but that transition of power and that transition onto the next generation is difficult from what I've seen. Yeah. It's hard for good leaders for some reason to pick good leaders. So I don't know why that is. And I've just noticed this, but Billy Graham, you got, I know some of these people, so it doesn't really matter, but in John Piper. Have you heard of John Piper?
No.
Hugely famous evangelical pastor in the Twin Cities. And he like built this company called Desiring God, and it's massive. And like they just pick the worst people to run it afterwards. And then the whole thing after a little bit of time sort of becomes, it moves into this like effeminate, progressive, like Jesus loves you is the gospel.
Yeah.
Nothing about like wrath and hell and sin, which is in the Bible and it's part of the gospel. I mean, you can't take that out of it. And so and I think it's because people who are, and this isn't derogatory or anything like that, but effeminate personalities are more easily controlled, I think, because they're more emotional. Hopefully I'm not just saying a bunch of offensive stuff.
No.
Emotional, you know, what do you think about that?
Generally, if you want the people that are more easily socially controlled are people that are more agreeable.
Yes.
I mean, this is a personality trait of agreeableness, especially like cooperativeness and politeness.
Right.
So nice people who you like are easy to control because you say, if you don't do this, you're not a nice person. So they just tend to be like sheep more.
And they don't rock the boat. And I think the prime example of this is Steve Jobs to Tim Cook. Steve Jobs is like a nut. Like he's like total narcissist, but he's a genius and like totally changed the world in a lot of different ways and whatever. I mean, but then Tim Cook, like if you're buying the same iPhone every year, like nothing is different. It's the same iPhone every single year. And I have nothing against Tim Cook.
You're talking about the transition from leaders to managers or from builders to founders to managers. And they're just different people.
Why? Why does that happen?
Because the people who start institutions are people with stronger personalities. You're going to find more narcissism. You're going to find more ego. You're going to find more visionaries. You're going to find people who are more antagonistic, because that's why you're founding your own institution, because you don't get along with the other ones. So you're naturally antagonistic. If you're, Martin Luther nailing that stuff on the church, I mean, that's like flipping the bird to the bow. I mean, you got to be kind of tough to do that. Right. And then what happens with every institution is the people that take over next are people who are managers. And after a few generations, you have people running around in an institution who wouldn't have been capable of building the institution. And so that happens to academia is that way now, where it's collapsed. I'm sure that's happened in the religious community. It's not my community. But I mean, obviously, you see this all over the place where that's just the nature of institutions, because once it's like frontiers people versus the people. I mean, it's like the people who make the frontier versus the people who come in next and settle. It's just different kinds of people.
Right. That's that's actually helpful just to think through things, because but that's also very discouraging, because I guess a couple of things. One is, how did our institutions last so long then to begin with? So you look in like the early American, like Princeton and Harvard and Yale, these were beacon. I mean, even Cambridge and Oxford, and they've still got some really good professors and doing good things, but I feel like they're kind of a shell of what they were. So how were they able to maintain the institutional strength for such a long period of time?
I mean, if you look on paper, they're probably bigger than they've ever been financially and in terms of reputation and stuff. I think that the Ivy League reputation has collapsed, not collapsed, but I think it's taken a hit. I shouldn't say collapsed. But I think the universities have gone through several phase changes. So they started out as religious institutions, then they became more scientific institutions. Then after World War II, they became sort of American military institutions. And, we put in all the grants and the NSF and NIH and running all this stuff from the back. Wow. And so they became kind of taken over by the federal government. And then what happened over the last 20, maybe more than 25 years, but at least 20 years of recessions in this country, the way the U.S. works is states can't print money, but the federal government can. So every time there's a recession, the universities run out of money. They tell the professors, you got to go get more money from the federal government. How do you do that? Well, I write a grant. Well, what grants did the federal government fund? Well, they fund grants that say what the federal government want you to say. You, as a normal person, look at the world and say, oh, there's 100 universities. And I look at the world and I see there's maybe one university with looks like with one hand underneath it running like a puppet show because it's all funded by the same governmental, the same folks at NIH or NSF. DARPA, whatever. It's all funded by the same people, and all the faculty will come out of Michigan or whatever. All know each other. It's all the same faculty.
Right.
So what looks like academic diversity is it doesn't exist.
It's literally not. That's the way you just described that is sort of intuitively, I felt that way, especially for the university, the seminaries. Like I was going to a school that was started by like a really conservative Christian guy, and I was doing online, and it was out in California, but it was the Masters University started by John MacArthur, who's like a pretty politically conservative, but I'm taking Old Testament survey class, which like, I don't know. In my, I guess my expectation for the class is that we were going to learn about the Old Testament. And we ended up learning about climate change. And I've never seen that in the Old Testament. And so I'm like writing my essay basically about how much my essay on that, one of my essays on that class was basically on how much I am like, basically how much I hate the fact that they brought climate change into Old Testament survey and how I'm not going to write on climate change because I don't see it in there. They gave me 100% on it, the essay, because I think the professor agreed with me, but there seemed to be this like shady, like, yeah, but we got to do it because there's some sort of connection to the government here, and that like, and then it makes you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist because you're like the government's behind all, but it's not a conspiracy.
Oh no, none of this stuff is. I mean, none of this stuff is conspiracy. I know the people.
So why is nobody saying that? Maybe they are. Maybe I'm just not listening. But
people don't understand how this stuff works at all. I mean, they don't understand how universities work. They just don't. Yeah. They don't understand science. They just don't get what the job is, and it's just hard to explain it to people.
Sure. So, but what like then is it basically over for the universities now? I mean, because I don't see why you would pay $100,000. But and I know you work for a university, so
I think it's I think universities are largely a scam. I think there's some really good parts. I think if I don't give advice, but if somebody's like, what do I do? Say, send your kid to the local football school, major in business,
Okay.
Go to football school, major in business, drink some, eat some butter burgers, have some beers, make some friends,
right.
Start hustling, figuring out what you want to do, make some connections and try to figure out a job. If you got a 140 IQ or something, you could do something a little more technical, 135 IQ, it's worth it. But otherwise, just don't spend the money. Go to your football school, have a good time.
And so I think, well,
I should say business schools aren't as bad as everything else in universities. You can go to business school and you run into normal people to be okay.
Yeah. The only thing that's frustrating is that being somebody who grew up in this generation and I really love learning a lot. But almost all the learning that I've done is completely by myself, reading tons and tons of books and listening to lectures. But I would have loved to, I was talking to my wife the other day, had things been differently in the education system in America. Like I probably would have loved to become a professor. That just sounds really fun, teaching and learning and teaching and getting paid for that. And like I graduated high school, and this is in Madison, Wisconsin. So we're pretty, our public school system is pretty far gone, but like I graduated high school barely with a 1.8 GPA, which is beyond horrible.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I checked out. Like I completely checked out because I was like, these people aren't interested. One, I'm not raising my hand to piss. Two, these people aren't interested in, especially when I'm like 17, I'm not raising my hand to go to the bathroom. Anyways, these people aren't interested in, they weren't interested in discussion and conversation and and I think truth, some of them were, but like very few of these teachers were.
Nah.
And if you were interested in that, you got like belittled and mocked. I mean, I had teachers like mock me and make fun of me in front of the class.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm not just going to do something that you tell me to do just because you're telling me to do it, or write this because you're telling me to write it. Yeah. When intuitively it seems like it's a little bit off. And also politically, there's political bias, and like, let's just get that out in the open. And like, I was getting kicked out of classes, and I'm not saying I did everything right. I probably was a total prick. I definitely was a prick, by the way. Like, but like, I wasn't to begin with. To begin with, I was like, let's have a discussion. By the time I hit 17, 18 years old, I was like, 2 middle fingers. I'll see you later. Yeah. Hopefully I get out of high school. And because of that, I wasn't able to get into colleges and universities. And then I started this podcast, and I've interviewed all these different professors all over the country, some of the really interesting people. And I've always thought like, man, it would be so fun to be in that world. But it's like you're saying, it's a little bit corrupted, but also that world, they didn't really set you up for that. I just didn't feel like they set me up to go that direction. It was very, very frustrating.
First of all, education, if you're smart, is the most boring thing on earth.
Yeah.
Like if you're naturally curious, I was fortunate. I got to go to a really good prep school when I was young, and I had an amazing education from 14 to 18 because I had a wealthy family sent me back east back in the day when you had to learn Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I went to college. I didn't even show up. I was so bored.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't even bother. I had a 2.47 GPA at Berkeley. You know,
That's pretty good then.
It was just ridiculous. And I like grad school, and I had a great time, but it's not, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody now. It's mostly about getting grants. And I'm just not, I kind of scraped a career together by not doing what I was supposed to.
Yeah.
And putting together little pools of money and starting fields that no one wanted to do. But there was no money for, like, just to put it in perspective, like originally I got one large NIH grant funded on narcissism when I was a junior faculty. And then I heard from NIH that this wasn't a major mental health problem. So narcissism wasn't an issue, and they weren't going to fund it. It wasn't worth the federal government's time to fund it. So my research was never funded.
What year was that?
Probably 15, 20 years ago.
So they're probably kicking themselves with Trump now. They're probably like, dang it, if we had that, we could have just used that against Trump.
No, I know. I mean, but that's how it's just, it's just kind of, it's just driven by funding. And the funder, I mean, it's stupid stuff. I mean, it's just, I shouldn't say that, but universities are it's incredibly boring now.
Yeah.
And I sometimes, I mean, academics, it used to be the freest place in the world was a university department 25 years ago, some in the 90s, let's say. It was so fun. It was so many ideas everywhere, and it's gone now. It doesn't exist.
It's horribly depressing to hear that. It's like horrible because I watched, one of my favorite movies ever is Oppenheimer. And it just came out recently, but you know, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer movie. And you see, and I know that's all physics and stuff like that. And those guys really helped create a lot of problems. But you see how the university interacts in that world, even like in that movie, it's a movie. So I know it's over the top a little bit, but there just seems something exciting and fun happening in the universities, that they're building things and they're doing things and there's real life impact and people have different ideas and they're disagreeable and they debate. Yeah. And it's like, when I talk to people who go to the universities now, it almost like I call it the intellectual Auschwitz sometimes, because you go there and they leave and it feels like something happens to them or something gets pulled out of their spirit. They lose interest in things they lose interest in education. They lose interest in learning. And then there's like this deadening process. And it's really sad when I see friends like that, because they go in with all these aspirations and ideas of what it's supposed to be. And then they come out like a zombie. And so, and it's frustrating because I actually believe in the original. It's like what you're talking about. I really would love to see that in America. Like, I would love to see that. Peterson Academy is good, and I really love Peterson Academy, but even there, you've got the technological, you're not in a classroom. You can't banter with the professors. You can't, like, I don't know, you don't get that real interrelational thing.
I mean, it's a different, yeah, I know. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, this is something people just complain about all the time. They want a rich intellectual, some people do. They want a rich intellectual life. Yeah. And universities really aren't the place people are finding it now, which is why there's been an absolute explosion in podcasts and why they've sort of decentralized academia. I don't know what the term is we have for it. Maybe it's decentralized academia or whatever, but it's become much bigger than academia. I mean, people are like, people are more interested in like alien Egypt than they are in anything done in anthropology and academia or anything like that. It's just so unfortunately we've just
well, how do you fix, like, do you have any ideas on how that can be fixed, or is it sort of just like we're
I'll tell you, when I was at Berkeley, the reason my GPA was so low is I just like kind of partied and read Nietzsche, read Jung, and that's all I did. I just drank beer and read Nietzsche. Yeah, and I didn't know how else to do it. If I were in charge of educating people, I'd be like, here's a bunch of beer and here's a bunch of Nietzsche and Hesse, and just start reading, and then we'll start talking, go from there. I'd throw them a King James Bible just for fun and a few other things and a Dhammapada. And so I just, it's just a different world. I don't know where the equivalent is. Like, I think the closest space to having these discussions are sort of things like podcasts. People have these discussions, but you don't get the real depth of like, where do you spend 5 years reading? I don't know.
Yeah, no, you don't get the depth, and it's also, podcasting has come with all of its own major problems, because once the principles of institutions, I think, are very, very good. Like, if you can have a healthy institution that allows for disagreeable people to interact with each other and not just be like a sort of ideological prison, then things are really good within a particular confines. You can't have like literal like communists trying to upend the entire social fabric. I don't think. I mean, you got to have some parameters in some sense. But like, this is why Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are what they are right now. It's because there's no trust in the media institutions. And then the podcasting thing blew up, and they are super compelling personalities. But they're wrong. Like, they're so wrong. I listened to Tucker Carlson for 6 months just to try to figure out what was going on with him. And it was it was like, if you listen to that every week for 6 months, you are going to be the most paranoid. Like, I was paranoid. I was like, we're about to enter World War III. And then it didn't happen. Like, 10 of the things that he predicted and he said this is going to happen just did not happen. And I was like, how is he still on? How is he still getting 10 million views per episode? And it's just because people are highly, why is, go ahead.
I mean, probably compelling, like a lot of the people on, they're just entertaining. But the trust has collapsed so hard in institutions. And I mean, we've done research on this. I did like a first paper on trust almost 10 years ago. We started looking at the collapse in trust, and it has just tanked. So people don't trust government. They don't trust academics. They don't trust any of the science stuff. And they shouldn't, by the way. I don't trust any of it either. No, they don't trust religion. They don't, I mean, what do they trust? So that means it's like free for all, like epistemological free for all. And then everyone's got a voice out there, and whoever's, and then what happens with groups is this is old social psych, but people get extreme. Like when you bring groups and start debating stuff, people tend to go to extremes because people who are at the extremes tend to know more. They tend to be more interested. They tend to be more sure of themselves. So they draw people. And so there's this natural sort of spreading when you separate people.
Yeah.
So that's just...
Well, I was just going to say like I totally see what you're saying because 20 years, Alex Jones, if you know him, Alex Jones?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He was like the most extreme person you can imagine. And he's trying to rein like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson in right now. He's like, dude, it's not all the Jews running it. Like, so it's, you know what I mean? It's like, I like listening
when I grew up, Alex Jones was like, he was on like AM radio next to the wrestling, like the WWE or whatever those wrestlers were. This is a little bit, it's like my younger brother was more his time. Like I was too old for this, but we just looked at it like wrestling, like it was just entertainment.
Fun. Yeah.
It was for fun. No one took it seriously.
Right.
It just got so weird. Anyway.
Yeah, well, and then, I mean, my friends and I would sit there and listen to the 4-hour podcast. I think it's the greatest piece of entertainment ever produced in human history, where we went way downhill after this. After Joe Rogan had Alex Jones and Eddie Bravo on for like 4.5 hours, and they just like effed with Alex Jones, and he was like so intense and yelling about stuff. And it's the funniest 4 hours. Like we would laugh so hard. Like in high school, we just play that all the time. That was kind of when entertainment peaked, I think. Yeah. But that he was so fringe, and now he's reining in some of these guys who have gone way too far. So that tells me that there's something weird is happening, and we're going. I don't know where this is going.
Sort of the Overton window of discord. Like when I was young in the 80s, politics, we were just between the 35-yard line. You know, it was guys going like, there was no, and then everyone switched sides. So now the people on the left are like people on the right were in the 80s, and people on the right are like people on the left were. So everyone kind of switched, but they didn't admit it. So it's so in the old days, it was the people on the right were like open immigration, and left was like closed borders, to raise wages for workers. And now the left is like open borders, and the right's like closed borders, except for some of the business guys still want open borders, but it just switched, and that's happened with a lot of stuff. It's just so interesting.
Yes.
Pro-war, anti-war went from left to right, and so when we were switching, everybody was kind of in the middle. And the other thing in the 80s and 90s is no one talked about politics because that was for dorks. Like it just wasn't that important. Like you would talk about fun stuff or art or music or politics, or entertainment or science or like weird stuff or whatever. But it wasn't like politics. It was kind of nerdy, and
that's healthy. I feel like that's kind of healthy.
Totally. You shouldn't be thinking about politics. What kind of country does you're supposed to waste your time fighting with people about things you have no control over at all?
You can't do anything about it.
Like my students with global warming, I'm like, how much control do you think you have over China's industrial base?
Right.
So then I usually ask my students, I'm like, why do you think everyone wants you to be so scared of this if you have no control over it? Why do you think that is? That's usually the question I leave them with.
Right. Oh, well, somebody's getting rich somewhere.
And then then it magically disappeared. Then climate change magically disappeared about 4 months ago when they realized they needed to power up 3 Mile Island for AI.
Yeah, dude. Dude. Because AI, that's the whole thing. Everything you're saying is very interesting, and I think it like obviously leaves you with this feeling of despair. I think that the thing in the 80s and the 90s, I never really grew up with this. Maybe the early 2000s had this a little bit. Like when I was a kid, politics was like. I had a family who was especially interested in politics a little bit. We like to talk about it and stuff. I think when Obama came along and post 2008, even after 2012, things started to become a little bit more volatile because Obama's policy and his philosophy was much more fringe than he let on. And he's a phenomenal speaker, charismatic.
Yeah, very charismatic, very talented.
And he seemed moderate. He seemed like middle of the line. And then he did. Well, I don't think he was that. And so people were like, whoa, we kind of got the wool pulled over our eyes and we got to figure out what's going on. And people are disillusioned. And then Trump came in 2016.
And it's been
bonkers.
It's been bonkers ever since.
Yeah. I was in high school during that. And
so
we were happy. Well, I like that night because I was 16, 15, 16. I wasn't really thinking deeply about this stuff. All I knew was I'm in Madison and everybody here who's a liberal shuts down conversation and tries to belittle you if you try to have a conversation about something or disagree, or if you come from a conservative Christian perspective, you were just wrecked. And so Trump to me was sort of like a guy who was just going to go in and wreck whatever that was. He kind of just was like, no, I'm going to talk about whatever I want to talk about. You can't control my tongue. And so we bought, I got donuts that night. We were happy. Not that, but as I look back now, I do think I'm not a majorly pro-Trump guy in 2024. He's become such a populist guy that I never realized in 2016 that he didn't have principles. I guess I just was angry at the institutions that already existed. And so he seemed like a disruptor. And I was like, I'm happy with the disruptor. But again, I was a high schooler, so I didn't know what I was talking about. But that was generally what I was thinking about at that point. Yeah.
Well, I don't think really anybody knows what they're talking about because I don't think most of us, including myself, really know what most of these political decisions are or what they're being made and why they're being made. So I remember going to the CIA and talking to people. I was talking to one gal, she's like, we have no idea why anything happens. Don't really try to figure it out. And I've had enough of these conversations with people that I don't really know what's going on. Yeah. I don't really know how decisions are being made. I don't know who's really making decisions. Yeah. I don't get the sense the politicians are necessarily making all of them. I mean,
I agree. Yeah.
And I have friends who are politicians. So I'm like, what the hell? And they're like, well, I don't know. I think it's, but yeah, my sense is, it was about 2012, around then when academia started, we were sort of going through an American cultural revolution. I tend to think of us as being in World War III. You sort of said you're worried about, I kind of think we've been in it for about 10 years, but I think it's more psychological, warfare and stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on that are making people crazy that,
Would you say it's psychological or spiritual? Because I felt like
you got me on air here.
So they're both very broad and how do you define both of those things?
Well, I'll tell you, there's psychological warfare is a real thing. We have a group, and I was going to go visit, and then they found out I don't have clearance. So I don't have clearance to talk about. I don't know anything.
Okay.
But it's a real thing. And so what they do is it's like military grade propaganda.
Yeah.
And we're using it on ourselves, and other countries are using it on us, and they're all using it through social media. And this has been going on since Arab Spring. Yeah. So we're all in a war right now, and an intelligent psychological war with people doing this. I mean, literally since the Arab Spring, I don't even remember when that was. 9 or 7, I can't even remember. But I talked to a guy at DARPA, at the Defense Research Group, and they're like, yeah, we got to figure this out because we're going to be using it too. So, I mean, this is just, we're in a war. I mean, this is just
just to clarify, you're saying psychological warfare. I mean, I imagine generally speaking through the phones, through TikTok,
just imagine super fancy propaganda.
My theory is that Tucker and Candace are paid off by Qatar.
It could be. I mean, that's, I have no idea. I don't have any idea at all, but I'm saying that's very possible. It's very possible all this stuff is set up. I don't know.
that's not that adds like such deeper layers of things. And because I read a book by a guy named Francis Schaeffer. I don't know if you ever heard of him, Christian guy, but he wrote this book in like the 70s called How Should We Then Live, which is like kind of a warning to the West. It's like how the West was built. And then he gets into at the end of it, sort of looking forward in a prophetic tone. And it's not prophecy. He's just saying, here's what's happening, and this is probably what's going to come of it. And people got mad at him for this. Like, people get mad at you when you look at the facts and you try to like basically tell people where it's going to go. And it's like you have a 99% chance of being right. For some reason, Christians get angry about that, whatever. Because you can be wrong, and I get that, but he was totally right. He started talking about like laws that they put into place for advertisers on the TV. They'll like play the advertisements at one point. Must have been pre-80s. Were created in a way to like psychologically manipulate people into buying a product. And they had to make that method of advertisement illegal because it was like hypnosis in a way. It was like a hypnotic sort of thing. And I just thought to myself while reading that, like if they were doing like policy on that in like the 70s and 80s, and then there's like the MK Ultra stuff that I don't know. I don't like RFK's dad. How did that happen? I don't know. Anyways, we'll just stay on.
Oh no, MK Ultra is a real. I mean, I just want to say this because I'm a psychologist, and we know all those old social psychology experiments of like persuasion and conformity, and those are military funded. I mean, those are militarily funded studies, and MK Ultra was real. Like my Substack, I call Explorations in Personality after the classic book by Henry Murray, who did the abuse work on Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, where he would stress him out and stuff. So these guys were all working for the military. Not all MK Ultra. I mean, they were working in like propaganda. The Hovland Group, that was military. Carl Jung was working for the Office of Secret Service, I think.
Carl Jung was?
Yeah. I mean, there's a great video out there. A lot of these guys were doing this stuff, especially during World War II. Everybody got roped into the war.
That is true. And I don't know if you know anything or like what your opinions on this is, but when I hear of hypnosis and what you're talking about with the psychological warfare, obviously TikTok in and of like TikTok's nature is to make us dumber. 30-second bits. You can't understand anything in 30 seconds, but people my age think that they're the most brilliant people ever when they watch a video like that. I as a Christian think that there's something deeply spiritual about that. Especially the hypnosis stuff. Yeah. I know you're a psychologist, and I don't know, like as you study the science of these things or how people interact with TikTok and social media or advertisements, the idea that you can like control someone's brain to me, I get that it's psychological, and I get that we put psychology into the camp of kind of a scientific endeavor. I don't fully see it that way. It's also philosophical in certain ways too. I feel like it's a couple different things, but people act like it's more scientific than not. And I think it is, but like controlling brains to me seems more than just science because that assumes that people are just material. And I don't think that they are. I think that they're more than material.
When you look at the psychological roots of this sort of control system we're living under, and you can hear like Brave New World is sort of, the kind of stories about it. Mm-hmm. But the people who were doing this was Freud's nephew, who wrote the book on propaganda, whose name is literally sitting right here. I can't even know what, Edward Bernays.
That was Freud's
It was Freud's nephew. And so he was using Freudian ideas like getting women to smoke cigarettes and torches of freedom, which is sort of like, this had to do with penis envy and stuff. So he was using Freudian techniques to manipulate people. Yeah. And then we also had people coming out of the behavioral schools, especially Watson, who went from behaviorism. He got in trouble with a student maybe doing something he shouldn't have, and he went into advertising. So he started using behaviorism in advertising.
Wow.
And then in World War II, when they needed the propaganda, they brought the whole rat group, the Hovland group out of Yale, to work on how to control and shape people's opinions. So we have a whole science that was built out to do this, before World War II and after, both to shape our opinions about military exercises and also products. So we built the modern consumer society. Like, we don't need any of this crap.
Wait, I totally.
This was all an operation.
Yeah, I know. We. Go ahead. Sorry.
So now I'll keep going, just because we're talking, and then you're talking about spiritual warfare and spiritual stuff, and I'm a psychologist, so I will say to you, I don't know what spiritual is.
Sure.
I managed to sneak the concept psycho-spiritual into a paper on ayahuasca, ceremonial use of ayahuasca for personality change. So I did sneak the term spiritual into the scientific literature, which I'm very proud of, into nature.
Yeah.
Because it's something that seems real to me. But as a scientist, I don't know how to express it in a way that's like, me not just, if that makes sense. Like, if you're like, dude, are we in a spiritual war? I'm like, hell yeah. Carl Jung talked about this stuff. You can read his books from the 50s and maybe 60s. And he's talking about modernity and how broken we are. We've lost complete touch with the sort of the natural functions of the world, the rhythms of nature.
The mimetic world.
We're broken. We're disconnected. And we wrote the Narcissist Gene, and I wrote the Narcissism Epidemic. That's about disconnection. It's about breaking people. We fill their egos up to break them away from the world and disconnect them from each other. And now we're kind of in the blow off of that narcissistic high we went through, and everybody's isolated, lonely, atomized. They don't feel connected to anything higher than themselves. And then they have this really, I will say, basic materialism they're running in universities, saying that human consciousness is the result of a lot of neurons working really fast. And then they think, hey, if we can make this on a computer, we're going to make these neurons go these whatever connections go so fast that they're going to become like a human, and pretty soon they're going to be conscious. And then guess what, Keith? You get to upload your consciousness onto that computer and you get immortality. And I hear that and I'm like, dude, that is like so straight Satan. It's hilarious. But you know what? I mean, I just, look, like I said, I'm not Christian. It's just pretty obvious to me what's going on, but
dude, can I go ahead?
So I will say, I don't think this model is correct. I think we can make machines that look like humans that pass the Turing test, which is the so-called test Alan Turing came up with, that if you have a machine that you can't distinguish from a person, it kind of is consistent with consciousness. I don't know if that's exactly what he said in the paper. And we have machines that do that. We can have an LLM now that does that. Right. People fall in love with these machines, but these machines aren't conscious. I don't think we know what consciousness is. In fact, that's the biggest problem in science right now. And we haven't bothered solving that because it's not on the government's agenda to solve the problem of consciousness.
There's like 8,000 things to talk about from that. But the first thing, I think it's interesting because you mentioned the propaganda. I want to talk about LLMs in a second, but the propaganda thing is weird because I've been trying to write a bunch of essays in my own time on like a good political philosophy for Protestants. We've been so passive and like there's not good, like Catholics are really good at producing political philosophy. They're just really good at it. Protestants have been really bad. It's just kind of like do whatever you want and your theology and politics are disconnected, which I don't think so. Because I think we're comprehensive people. And as I've been writing, there was like I kind of like have been developing like a federalist vision where the states there's a more local state-based thing. And then there's the questions of like, okay, if it's highly local, where the states are their own entities, like it was designed in the beginning, the United States, the Constitution, then you have questions of how do you get people to enlist in the military without coercion? Like how do you get the individual states to incentivize being a part of the broader union? And like I've been going on AIs and like trying to like kind of go back and forth with AI on this.
Yeah.
Cause it's just probably like they're probably like totally messed up. But anyway, they said the AI was like, you know, democracies that don't coerce people into military, to joining the military. So like I had played around with the idea of, well, how about we force everybody to 2 years of military service? That sounds like a good idea. But then it's like, well, that undermines the Federalist vision because you're coercing them into a federal way of doing things. And so the AI like showed some studies or papers on like that democracies have better voluntary militaries than obviously than like communist countries. Like people want to volunteer in the military, like in World War II. And because of that, like you have better military because you're not actually forcing people into it. People are actually voluntarily doing this. But that's not even really true then, I guess, because if we've got propaganda machines that are like propagandizing people into wanting to join the military, even though they want to join the military, they don't really want to join them. They don't, whatever it's to want something becomes a different conversation in that situation.
Thank you. The idea of falling back on individual free will and choice to build your society becomes harder when people can manipulate that free will and choice without your knowledge, and they can do it very easily.
So do you think the men of the Revolutionary War who fought, maybe there was propaganda. I don't know if there was a concerted effort towards propaganda in that era. They were like genuinely volunteering. Whereas World War II, it's a little bit more like the Nazis are coming. We got to do something now. And we've got these psychologist people, or were they psychologists?
Yeah, in World War II, the big thing that came out of it was propaganda films, like reels you'd go to the movies, and before it, they'd show the movie reels to get people in the war. I think people, I think it gets very complicated. I think, people join the military because they get status and they get to be with the best of the best. And so you can have people, people don't want to fight for America right now, or at least, under the last administration, I think it's changed a little bit. And this is just me talking to my students, but after that pullout of Afghanistan, I remember one of my students going, I'm going to the military. And he looks at me and just rolls his eyes. Like, he's like, I know what you're going to say. They're a bunch of losers. He goes, but I really want to be in the special forces. And so you have these guys that are like, I want to see if I can prove myself. It's not doing it to, I'm not service. It's like, I want to see if I got what it takes.
Man, I don't know if that's the best.
I'm just saying that's what totally. I think some of those guys are just like, I want to see if I can frickin' do it. I want to see if I've got what it takes. I want to do the missions. And most people are fighting for the people next to them, not for the government, for the people, it's not like that. I think it's more, I got my buddies, we're doing a mission. We got to come back alive.
Right. Well, it becomes even more difficult when birth rates are declining. I mean, a lot of the people, my great grandfather was in World War II as a tank commander, and I was sitting with some friends in the summer, and we were talking about World War II, because that's just what you do. And one of my friends, he's like, how do you get people to go do that? Like, you just go to Germany or wherever, like across the ocean, and leave their family and probably die. Like, how do you get people to do that? They didn't have kids. I'm married and I have 3 kids. And I'm like, because they were all married and had kids, or they had just gotten married or whatever, like they had that vision for their life. Like if I knew the Nazis were going to come to America, like that was their goal, I would probably enlist, because I don't want them to kill my kids. I don't, like, that's kind of why I would do it. and because like they're evil and I don't like them and all that they stand for. But it's like, if you don't have kids and you don't have a family and you don't have a future and you've rejected that vision of life, that way of life, then I think it's a lot harder to convince people to fight for the future. Why not just hoard what you got right now here in America?
I think the collapse in fertility is the biggest problem in the world probably right now.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of reasons for it. It's global. But I think part of it is this sense of people have no meaning, no sense of future, no reason to exist, no reason to fight, no reason to have kids, no reason to do anything except sort of entertain themselves and fill their brains up a little bit at a time until they die. It's really sad.
It's horrible.
I mean, it's brutally sad. And
yeah, absolutely not. I'm absolutely not in any way, shape, or form. I don't see people like you couldn't. Yeah, no, I don't see it. I don't, and I feel the same way because you almost have to grow up in a family who uniquely respects those sacrifices of the past. I mean, there's so much nihilism in the way that people talk about things. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, this is crazy. And it's like C.S. Lewis wrote about this 80 years ago in his book, The Abolition of Man. He's like, this is where we're going. And here's what's going to happen. And no one listened to him. But we were at someone in our family's house, to be vague here, and we can't agree on that anymore. And so that's that's when we start talking about, I think the main problem is when I read this book by Carl Trueman. Do you know Carl Trueman?
no.
Okay. He is a Christian guy, called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's right up my alley.
Oh, you were like, hold on, let me just make The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Yeah, cultural amnesia, expressive individualism. It's from a philosophical perspective. Yeah. Dude, you got to read this book. It was one of the most important ones that's come out in the past 5 years, in my opinion. He talks about Charles Taylor describing the two ways of viewing reality, mimetic and poietic. And like, not to be too reductionistic and simplistic, but it seems to me like we've fully moved from mimetic worldview. There are natural laws. We're governed by those laws. To poietic. We control the world. We control everything. We can all of Earth is raw material. All of our bodies are raw material. We can do whatever we want with anything. And the reality is, it really looks like that. We sent people to the moon. That's controversial, but we have planes at the very least. We sent people to the moon. We have phones. We have all this technology. I'm talking to you. We're totally across the country. Everything we do is infused with this poietic facade. And it makes it seem like there are no natural laws. There is no objective truth. We create that, and you can't rein that in. It's everywhere all the time, no matter what. We have light switches. I think the first president who had light switches turned the lights on and kept them on for like 2 months because he was afraid of them. Like the old world was different. People were just people were different because of it. And is this the right terminology? Psychophysiological ramifications of the I hope that's the right way of using that word. Sure. Of these it's changing us. The technology is changing us, and it's making us believe, or we already do believe, that the world is poietic and we control everything and there are no laws. And like you're saying, there's a crisis in meaning and spirituality and religion. Yeah, like you can't really believe those things. God and poietic worldview do not go together. No matter what religion it is, it doesn't work, because God or the gods or whatever is like finite and, well, infinite and finite. There's paradoxes in it, but God defines things and controls things in most religions, and you don't really get a say in how that works. That's just how it is. You just got to believe it in faith and try to be obedient. And if you are in a poietic world that's telling you that literally everything is the opposite of that, I don't know how you can I don't know what to do about that. It feels like then if you want to do the right thing, you just got to go get a farm.
Well, yeah, I mean, that worldview puts a whole lot of pressure on you because it says you have to come up with meaning and you have to make everything happen. And if it doesn't work, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And it's not really how we are. And the natural world works with systems and cycles that are bigger than us. It's just the nature of it. So I think it's been a huge mistake. I think that's what I mean. We don't understand consciousness.
So that was, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, the most basic, important question, we don't understand it. And so we're idiots. And so, but we pretend because we can do some tech stuff.
Yeah.
And all I look at humans, I'm like, yeah, we have a lot of tech. So we're really weak and I could get taken out by a raccoon.
Yeah,
because we evolved for so long with weapons and groups. And so, no, I'm not a huge fan of this tech. And I also found it hilarious. My students stopped believing in the moon landing.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, if you can get the society to not believe in that, it's really interesting time.
It's fascinating because on one hand, these same people, I mean, a lot of people who would say that the moon landing didn't happen would also say that we are the most technologically advanced civilization in human history.
Yeah.
Like, which is it? Because you've got more computing power in your hand. So the fact that we were able to compress computing power to that small of a device, why can't it be like that on a big device 60 years ago, which is a rocket ship? I don't know. There's a lot of like questions. Consciousness, I'll just say this because I'm really scared of large language models and AI. Like I'm scared of them in a Christian way, where we're like, Jesus is going to defeat them. but the LLMs they're interesting because as far as I understand, and I'm listening to Roy Baumeister's Big Ideas in Psychology lectures. But he says something that I think was already proven in the Bible. But he said it, and it's interesting that the one differentiating factor between human beings and all other animals is language. And that's always been the differentiating factor. And I think that's why John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There's an inherent, the nature of God is the Word. It's language. I think theologically, what it means to be made in the image of God is that we have the capacity for language. I think in heaven we'll have superstructures of language, and we'll be able to. People say that at the core of faith is like a bunch of paradoxes. That's what G.K. Chesterton says. He's awesome. He's Catholic. He was. There's a bunch of paradoxes that you have to believe in faith that you can't understand logically. God becoming man, 100% God, 100% man. The resurrection, things like that. These are paradoxical things that are axiomatic, but you can't articulate and understand logically. My position on that is that we can't articulate them and understand them logically, not because they're illogical, but because we don't have language structures that have the capacity for that sort of articulation. Which is the first test on this earth, is to believe in faith and obedience. And then in heaven, you gain the superstructures of language to be able to understand more of the meanings of things. I don't know if that sounds crazy or not, but
it reminds me of a quote by Aeneas Nin, whoever you say that name, that, the world is written on, the old ways they made books was 4 pages of paper that were folded together and then you cut them into 4. She said, the world is written on all 4 and we can only write one at a time. It's just, we're super limited.
Yes, exactly.
So this limited dimensional space of our language.
Yes.
Right.
But that's also, it's also a magical thing too, because it's hard. Even the evolutionists, I've never heard a good argument for how language evolved. It's almost a thing, and maybe I haven't read enough, but it's like, how do you evolve a language? You almost need the whole thing because they're all predicated, an alphabet. How does an alphabet evolve unless it's sort of like imputed through something higher and bigger? Back to LLMs, I was just say, the language models seem to me fairly scary because they're built on language, and we don't really build our computers are built on types of languages, but these large language models are built on these They're built on language, and they're almost creating their own languages and things like that. And they're like backing themselves up on different language models, which is horrifying that we don't understand. And it's kind of the first time where you've had something that is a sort of a counterfeit logos, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, that's a good way I like that a lot. Counterfeit logos instead of artificial intelligence.
Yeah. And so, if you look at the biblical, apocalyptic revelations is like a apocalyptic literature. And you look even like parts of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and there's discussions of the end times. There's, counterfeit logos is everywhere. It's like a man of lawlessness comes and he's the Antichrist, like the counterfeit logos or whatever. And it's just fascinating that like, it would be interesting to me if human beings were playing a pivotal role in building that. And then it was sort of like imputed with some sort of like a satanic being. Anyways, that's all like crazy. I know that sounds like crazy theology. Like, I don't know how it's all going to work.
I will say this, sort of from the science perspective, there's a class of phenomena known as revelations, where people have revelations, or sometimes they call them downloads or connections from the divine. And lots of our great scientific breakthroughs come from those, like the benzene ring, is famously the dream of the Ouroboros and stuff. My field, my career is mostly I have visions. Like I'm not a thinker. I'm a pretty good thinker, but mostly I have visions. And so that's a very common way of people getting insights into things. And if you start going into the psychedelic space, where people are studying this is happening all the time. That's what psychedelics are doing, are giving people revelations. I think it was like almost like a subtype of mystical experience, or in that same category of sort of transhuman experience.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of this stuff is coming from there. So if you really want to add your sort of spiritual model to the LLMs, who's feeding these ideas to the people coming up with them?
Wait, so you think people?
I'm not saying I think. I'm just throwing this out there for you.
So there's there's a world in which, because I was going to ask you why, when you were studying, or why is it ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca, yeah.
That you felt it necessary to psycho-spiritual to like put that into the academic world. Is it like, so you're saying like there's like people are taking drugs and there's something happening, and then
or dreams or visions,
so
and these ideas are coming into their head, and then they're manifesting and creating these things.
Okay, this is good, because I'm interested in this because dreams are strange. Like, and I listened to Jordan Peterson's lectures on personality. I think he talks about like a little bit about dreams on those. Just tell me, like, what do you mean by all that?
You're getting weird. I'm just trying to make it a little weirder.
Totally.
So, you're saying, okay, they're making a false logos or a counterfeit logos. So who's they? And you're saying it's a bunch of guys, so computer
Silicon
guys. I'm like,
Valley.
well, where are these ideas coming from? Who's feeding these ideas?
Right.
And you got a bunch of guys at Burning Man doing a bunch of drugs. I don't know where these ideas are coming from. I'm sure they're getting a lot of revelations from that. So maybe this is being built itself. So if you wanted to come up with the crazy Christian conspiracy theory, what you'd say is a bunch of fallen angels are sitting there under Mount Hermon or wherever they're supposed to be, is sending out these messages to people to rebuild a device so they can jump back in and get back in control.
Dude, I like that. I think that.
Think about it.
Is that so?
I'm not a Christian. I'm just trying to play your game a little bit there, but that's where it gets a little crazy.
I could see that a little bit. I mean, but that's predicated on, I imagine, like when you're studying this stuff like ayahuasca, from the scientific perspective, how do you deal with these revelations or connections or whatever we call those?
People write about it. Like David Yaden has a great book. He kind of redid William James' Varieties of Religious Experience, sort of updated it with a lot of science. It's wonderful. I don't think we don't really have a good way of making sense out of it. And I tend to be in the camp that there are some other non-human intelligence people are tapping into.
Really?
That's what I think. But
why do you, what makes you not to like, I don't know. I feel like some of the stuff is you can't prove it, like Christianity.
Because I can't come up with a good alternative explanation.
Yeah.
For things. And others can't either. Like others that are smarter than me can't either. So you have these very powerful spiritual experiences. I've seen people have them. I've had them. I've watched it. Very life-changing. And the models you would go to as a psychologist or maybe Carl Jung, you'd say, oh, you're in the realm of archetypes and these are archetypal energies. So that's about the closest. That's usually the book you'd pull out. You'd say, well, it's something Jungian.
Yeah.
Maybe you go back to William James. It doesn't line up as clearly with the archetypes as you'd think. It just doesn't quite line up with a Jungian archetypes as well. But that's probably the closest thing we can come up with. So it gets very strange and people get very strange messages. And that's why I don't recommend these. I studied this. I did like 5-6 years of research on it and it was very interesting. But anyway, I'm just saying people are connecting to things and you're not sure what those things are.
Well, is that same phenomena that you see in like taking external whatever drugs or whatever it is and having messages? Is that who is the psychologist who grew up Protestant and he focused on dialogue for therapy, just talking it out really? Who is that? Do you know?
I don't. I'm thinking of a guy named Herman, but I don't think that's who you're talking about. So I'm not sure. Be. The
only guy I heard it on a Peterson thing, one of Jordan's lectures, but basically does that same revelatory thing happen through reading? Like, I know that's a weird question, but like when people are reading and like engaging with ideas through dialogue or even through reading. Yeah.
I think so. I think people I think we overestimate thinking as a way of arriving at ideas. Like I sit around with a bunch of ideas and then think and then come up with them. And really what happens is ideas appear.
Yeah.
And we're not really sure where they appear from. You take psychedelics, they appear. You take a walk in the woods and sort of get in a little bit of a looser mind state, they appear. You're falling asleep and they appear in your dreams. Right. So I think under stress, they can appear. I think under relaxation or sort of that liminal state where you're right at the threshold of consciousness and unconsciousness, I think you can get ideas appear in that state. So sort of a semi-dreamlike state. People take walks for ideas. People do different things. People who in the idea business will do things to generate ideas. A lot of people have great ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. I'm I know that this is probably not what you expected us to be talking about, but this is very interesting. The one consciousness, but you've mentioned dreams a couple of times. I guess I'd be interested in what your perspective is on what dreams are. So, what, and also, because I feel, people have dreams and they feel like sometimes they're telling them stuff about reality. And I think that there's some legitimacy to that just from a practical perspective. I've seen that. I don't know any of the details.
Yeah. I don't have a really strong opinion on dreams because I'm not up to date in a lot of the research, which is more sort of from the bio side, and, dreams are good for memory consolidation and things like that. My take on dreams is that sometimes, and this is coming from Carl Jung, sometimes you get these dreams that are very archetypal, that seem very revelatory. They seem important. They have these sort of archetypal imagery. They stick with you. They just they're big dreams, as Jung might call them. And then you have your everyday dreams that might have information that is sort of, and I don't know if the dreams themselves are as useful, but the process of thinking and reflecting on your own dreams. And I think that can be a useful way to sort of unlock pieces of yourself a little bit as a practice.
So this is all interesting because I don't know if I've ever talked to like somebody in academia who's in the sciences who has, and I don't talk a lot of scientific people, so this is not saying much. But that is, you're saying it feels like when you've studied some of these things, the idea of like the revelations or whatever, that seems to be, it's at the very least pointing to some sort of mystery, like where are these things popping into people's heads? There's like a deep mystery. I think like the theory of general relativity and the quantum world, that seems to be totally paradoxical and crazy. And that's another space where it's like we've taken the scientific endeavor, what we maybe seemingly to the end of where it, like to the far outer reaches of things, like we've taken it to the end of whether it be the physical world or just sort of thinking about human, or I guess like the brain and how we interact with people. And there's like questions of like, there's strange things happening. There's like strange things. And it doesn't seem to fit. And I'm just saying, I have no agenda here, but like, it doesn't seem to fit I have a hard time fitting it with like the evolutionary, the
evolutionary bio theory.
Yeah.
Like we have the kind of the two models we have is like basic evolution, that humans just evolved 150 to 300,000 years ago in small tribes. And that's kind of set our psychology up. And that's what we are, just sort of Stone Agers lost in the modern world. There's a lot of truth to that model, but I don't think it's complete. Like, at all. And then we have this very, materialistic view of things, that everything's in like the brain first model, which is again, really weird to me. And then we have a lot of emphasis on sociology, like these social systems that they're just sort of theories that don't seem to do much. So I think there's a lot we have to learn. I think we're ready for a big revolution in our understanding of consciousness, biology, and it probably goes back to a revolution in physics that isn't happening, but I don't know enough about it. I just get the sense the system is stopped.
Interesting.
Like we're not the science isn't really being generative right now. I don't see a lot in psychology, at least, that's really, the hottest stuff is the psychedelics, which are sort of bringing back what people were doing 50 years ago.
Right.
But other than that, and that might be enough, that might be enough to really break the paradigm, but I don't see a lot of other really interesting areas. This guy, Michael Levine in biology, is doing some incredible stuff that's really interesting with sort of more electric models, magnetic models of biology. So I do think there's some stuff happening, but it feels like we're choked off a little bit. Like we're going to change a lot.
And the people who were, I feel like, interested in trying to figure some of that out, you kind of were kicked out of academia for.
I'm a very, you're talking to me, I'm very fringe. Like I'm just a fringe guy. I've published, my H index is over 100, so I'm allowed to say whatever I want at this point. But that's why I do. I'm old enough that I don't really have a career I have to worry about pretending I'm Dr. Science.
That's interesting because there are two camps. Maybe there's more than two camps, but I'm seeing you kind of got the people who are sticking to their guns. Oh my gosh, I can't think of the guy's name. Jordan did a debate with him, with Alex O'Connor. He's hardcore Darwin evolutionary scientist. Why can't he's the most famous? Dawkins.
Oh yeah.
Dawkins. Yeah. He's just sticking to it. He's just like, this is what I think. And then he said, I'm a cultural Christian, but then he was like, well, I actually, no, I'm not. But then Jordan seems to be trying to like look into the Bible from a psychological lens. And so there seems to be sort of a traditional revolution where people are kind of going back to the traditions of Christianity and Catholicism in particular, but even Anglicanism and some high church sort of liturgical ways of doing things, because they're seeing that there's an order to that seems to be much more encouraging of a flourishing life in some way, shape, or form. But with all the scientific stuff, there seems to be like Jordan is trying to like integrate it. I don't know if that's the right word to say, integrate it. And you know, I'm skeptical as I think I'm like, I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a fundamentalist in Christianity because I don't like that terminology. I just think that what it says is what it means. But I think that there are like an infinite amount of layers of interpretation. So a psychological interpretation of scripture, I think, is legitimate. But I think if that's the first way in which you interpret it, I think you're going to go off in wrong directions, because I think there's an order of operations. I think you have to interpret it in one way and then another way and then another way until you get to the psychological interpretation. Or does this make any sense?
It does. My general thing is like there's 7 ways to interpret everything, and they don't always line up. And I don't, I mean, like talking about the time before the flood, were there really giants?
Right.
I don't know. Some people could say, well, that was just a metaphor for big people or for angry, aggressive people. And other people are like, yeah, they said giants, there's giants.
Right. How do you read it?
I think there are giants just because I tend to be a little bit, I like to take the outside shot on things, but I don't have any proof of that,
So when you're reading it, are you reading it like when you read about Jesus, are you reading it from sort of that perspective of like, okay, what's the sort of mythological or metaphorical?
I do. I mean, when I'm reading, sorry to cut you. When I'm reading, let's say I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading it and then I'm trying to compare it to every other religious tradition to try. So I look at the Bible, I compare it to, like, I read the old, Genesis. I'm comparing it to El and Enki and Lil and stuff. And then I'm trying to make those stories make sense. And I'm trying to link it to the Egyptians. So I'm always trying to do this sort of cross-cultural comparison because I was sort of raised on Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. So that's my natural sort of way of thinking about these things, is try to make sense of them sort of archetypally. And then I read it for just what it says and try to take it seriously. So like, Sodom and Gomorrah, like I was raised like, oh, this is about gay people being bad. And I'm like, so I'll go read Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm like, wait a second, this is about aliens and people having babies with what?
Oh, the Nephilim.
So you read it and you go, wait, they're telling me something that I didn't learn in Sunday school. They're talking about something very different. Sure. And then you go read other traditions. You go, they're talking about the same thing over here. So I tend to look at it that way. And I tend to take people at their word. I'm not looking like everything's a hidden mystery.
Right.
I try to listen to it at first, and then you go, well, it's a parable. What's it a parable for? But I tend to take it pretty real.
What are the implications? I don't know what you think about, like, if Jesus was a real person or if I don't know what you think, but like, I know Jung said that the story of Jesus is the worst possible tragedy. How does he describe that? It's like it was the greatest self-sacrificial act. Just the story, the worst possible tragic, like terrible things that could happen to somebody, and then like the best response to it, and like
it's trickster.
It's like a paradox. So what are I guess from your perspective or a psychological perspective, like, let's say we found conclusive evidence, which we won't, that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and not just eyewitness, but like, I don't know how we would
have Shroud of Turin.
That is, I totally, but like, people are still skeptical of it. Like, if it was so clear, it's like clear as day, this is just what happened. Jesus was a real human being. He rose from the dead, and which I think is totally true. But the psychologist, in general, I don't know how.
Andy, I'm a yogi. I mean, I've been to Tibet back in the day. I've ridden the hills of Mongolia. I've done this stuff. People die and come back. That happened a few years ago, there's a guy in Taiwan, a monk who died for a long time that went into a state of death and then died later. I mean,
really,
people can do amazing, amazing things. The idea of Jesus rising from the dead doesn't
get you. Okay.
That doesn't bother me at all.
What about
dude, I've seen so much crazy stuff.
This is so weird for me though, because when I've talked to like professors, and I'm in Madison, so maybe it's just a microcosm or something like that, but there's such it's not anger. It's like a shutting down of like, well, that obviously couldn't happen. Jesus can't raise from the dead. Science tells us that he can't do that. So that usually to me is
science. What the fuck is science?
I agree with what you're saying. We're on the same page.
I'm science.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of dudes, women, whatever. It's just people talking.
And so it's kind of what you're saying about like the universities are falling apart because it's kind of a club of elitists who think that they know more than everybody else.
Well, it's just a way of thinking that sort of takes your ego. It's a formalized as a way of approaching problems to take your ego out of it and structures the problems. It also makes it social so we can build a shared cultural literature so we don't have to start from ground zero. Science is wonderful. It's a wonderful process. It's a wonderful tool. It keeps me from being stupid. So I'm having these discussions with you, but I'm like, dude, I'm not betting on them. I can tell you how we could try to figure this out scientifically and maybe we could figure it away. But a lot of things you really can't do.
Right.
So no, the other mistake people make is they go, if you can't measure it scientifically, it doesn't exist.
That's stupid.
You can't measure much at all. There's very limited window of what we can measure, but everything else is real.
Right.
We can't measure it.
You can't measure that statement. The statement that you got to measure things. Like you can't measure, you can't measure language, you can't measure these things, but you have to, there's some inherent. Okay, so this is interesting though. So how then does like the study of psychology, because I've seen a lot of people try to integrate it theologically and just honestly like just study it. Like the psychological thing is like a big deal right now. A lot of people are interested in psychology, and it seems to me like there's no moral framework, which really bothers me, and that's probably because I grew up in like totally Christian, biblical, so like there's no moral framework. The way that you do it is interesting because when you're lecturing like on narcissism, I never got the sense that you thought it was like objectively bad or objectively good if you're a narcissist, which was actually helpful in that case because you can think of examples on both sides in which you needed a narcissist and in a situation and you really don't need a narcissist in another situation. And so it felt like that was a little bit more fluid or across sort of spectrum. But in studying this stuff, what I've noticed is that if the wrong people are studying it, and I'm just going to say the wrong people, I don't know how else to describe these people, they take the fluidity across personality and different, and the human beings are strange and there's all these different ways and personalities. And they take that, let's just say relativity, and they apply that in I don't think consciously, but maybe subconsciously to like morals, So if the narcissist if it's Winston Churchill, to me, Winston Churchill was a good narcissist, and he probably was bad and he probably did dumb things. Everybody does, but I like him, and I like him as a narcissist, and I'll die on that hill. Thank you to Winston Churchill. Hitler was a bad narcissist, in my opinion. I think that's pretty clear, but so many people are so morally bankrupt right now that to say that stuff in our culture is like totally controversial. So how do you add a moral framework?
It's like this really, it's kind of a dumb universalism that people have. It's a little bit thoughtless. I mean, I don't know. I really try not to label things as evil because I think it shuts down thinking.
Sure.
And when, we're fighting terrorists, we're like, they're evil, we got to kill them. I'd rather sit down, maybe have a conversation over a cup of tea and see what's going on. Like
with a terrorist?
I'll talk to anybody.
I would too, but I don't know what if they, don't want to talk to you.
No, I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
like,
I get what you're saying.
I did clinic. I talked to some pretty sketchy people.
Sure.
I talk to anybody.
Yeah,
I'm curious about people. I'm not sitting there like I'm not Mr. Judge.
Yeah, totally.
So I think there's something useful about not foreclosing on things and ideas in order to think clearly about them. But that isn't a moral thing. It's not saying, yeah, I'm willing to talk to Hitler. It doesn't mean like, yeah, it means he's just good. I'm not going to say he's a good dude. Right. It's like, yeah, he's an evil motherfucker. But I'm curious about why. I'm curious about what exactly why. Everybody's got a little bit of good and bad in them. Maybe he's got some good. Where did that come from? Maybe it's I don't know. I mean, I'm not a Hitler guy. They've written a million biographies about him.
Yeah.
Not my interest, but I would talk to anybody. And so, but my sense is there's kind of a very soft, there's bad people and good people in academia, and and it's usually like power is bad. I think that's kind of a thing. Like if you have power, you're generally bad. If you're powerless, you're generally better. It's sort of a weird system. I don't really
like you're saying like that's what you found is that like people
it seems like sort of the moral system they're using is like, people that are like successful and like students applying for universities. I was talking to a student. She goes, do I have to do a sob story? And I'm like, dude, I don't get to choose who comes to university. I don't let the faculty pick.
Right.
She goes, well, my sister did all this sob story and I don't want to do a sob story, but I heard if I do that, I get in. I'm like, well, do your freaking sob story. Wow. If that's what they want. I would do whatever you need to do. That's what I mean. Yeah. It's like you want these kind of sob stories and it's a little bit like that's valued more. It's just weird. Yeah. It's a little bit feminine, I think. Yeah. And just how it's a little bit caregiving. It's a little bit like we want to help the weak. And that's not bad. I mean, it's not bad.
No.
For a person. Right. It's just hard if you want to build a powerhouse killer institution. It's not what you do. And it's not what our football team does.
Well, and to your point about the effeminate part of that, obviously women are designed to be take care of babies. And like, I'm not good. We have 3 kids. We have a baby right now. I like them when they get older. Like when they're babies, I'm like, I love my children, but I just have a hard time at that age. Like,
usually guys, you have to 6 months, they're a little more fun. Yeah. And by 3, they're kind of like, then you can throw them around. Yeah. More enjoyable.
Totally. Yeah. So just, I guess, go back to the beginning of the conversation about social workers. So I just felt like, and this could be a wrong intuition, that social workers are not grandiose, but they're vulnerable and vulnerable narcissism. And this is an interesting thing between the pastors and the social workers, because it seems like the priests and the pastors in our society are being replaced with social workers, and therapists and that psychological realm, which is another thing that I think is very interesting. And I'm nervous about because like we've talked about in this conversation, even there's so many different views and the psychology, you could go in a million different directions with psychology, or even methods of engaging in therapy. And so who knows which ones work really well and which ones don't. But are the social workers, what do you think about the social workers?
My experience with social workers was working in a mental hospital in San Diego in 1990 or 2 or something with a bunch of social workers. I loved them but they seemed like they had the hardest job on earth. Yeah. Failed at almost everything they did because they couldn't really help people because it's harder than it sounds. Yeah. And they just kept doing it because they wanted to be good. And so I have this bias. I have a very pro-social worker bias just because I'm like, man, you guys are just getting your ass kicked and you're not making any money and you're really trying and you're good people. Yeah. And so I'm a little bit biased that way. So I don't see but I do see it at the vulnerability and the more of that victim mindset, which is like, everything should work for me. it should go my way. It's not going my way. I'm going to blame everybody else. That more victim mentality. So I don't,
Well, the social workers seem to be the ones that are always doing, talking about the incarceration rates, the ones that I've talked to. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be an interesting thing because it kind of, to your point, maybe like there's a tendency towards, like, let's get rid of we need peace officers, not police officers, but peace officers. And I don't think that works. We lived in Minneapolis for a while. It doesn't work. It doesn't. I don't think, just for the sake of safety, it doesn't work. Not rehabilitation. No. It's the question of what's the point of a police officer? Are they to just keep everybody, the community safe, or is there a rehabilitative aspect of the law enforcement? I don't think so, but it doesn't mean that we can't have conversations about how to rehabilitate these people. But like you said, a lot of people don't want to be rehabilitated. They don't want to be changed.
This stuff goes back to way before your time and really before my time in the 60s and 70s when they got rid of all the mental institutions. And what happened was there was a group of psychologists who said mental disorders were kind of fake. They were just a normal response to a crazy world. And we need these people to be integrated into the community. Oh, wow. And so we'll shut down the hospitals and integrate people.
Who said that?
And then you had a bunch of Republicans who said, it's a little political. They're like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We're not going to pay for that.
Right.
So what happened was, you can look at a graph of like people in mental hospitals and people in prisons, and it just kind of swaps.
Yeah.
And so we had this huge crime wave that I think peaked in 91 or 92. That was when California was the 3 strikes you're outlaw. That's when Hillary Clinton was calling people super predators. They buried a lot of this stuff. And we incarcerated everybody. And it worked.
Really?
Crime is way down. It went way down from the 90s. Yeah. So if you go look at a murder graph, it worked. And then, of course, it worked. And then they go, okay, it's Chesterton fence. Oh, we got all these people in prison for no reason. Let's just get them, let them go. And it starts creeping back up. And when they stopped enforcing crime, during COVID for a while, it kind of spiked. And now I think it's coming down again. People are probably too busy on their phones to do crimes as much.
Or they're doing crimes on their phones.
Or they're doing phone crimes that aren't being caught.
Right.
Yeah. So locking people up is effective. It does seem to work.
Are there any studies on, I probably not, because we didn't, I don't know if we were doing studies, but before mental institutions were around, like one of the interesting things, so mental disability has become, like you're saying, if you can create a sob story, you can get into the university system. Now, I think part of that is victimization. What sort of socioeconomic situation did you grow up in? If it's worse, then you got a higher chance of getting into the university, or like what race you are. It's a lot of that stuff. But even like mental disabilities which I like, I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. They're just being, I feel like we used to just say mental disabilities they're disabilities. And now we're like, no, it's a superpower. It's a good thing. And I don't want to be rude or anything. Like I love people. We should obviously respect everybody and love everybody, but they're not a superpower. I don't know how else to put it. It's not that way. So and it seems contagious. So with the trans thing, so like if you let all of the mental institution people into society, do they have are they able to use social media in a way that's contagious that other people
that's interesting. I don't know. This transition happened, we're talking like a half century ago where we used to have these effective mental hospitals. They just don't exist. You can see them in black and white movies.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I think that, I think the mental health and onlineness is complicated. And I think a lot of it is it's activating, social comparison processes and things like fear of missing out. I'm not attractive enough. So just basic, that's just basic control stuff.
Yeah.
it's also spreading some contagions. You know, people will have, like when I was in mental hospitals, there's a lot of cutting going on. Like people would cut themselves and stuff like that gets spread in a contagious way. Pardon my dog.
That's fine.
But you know, so mental illness gets spread and it kind of goes in cycles. Drug use, you know, like cocaine was really big in the 70s and 80s, and it went away because people saw how bad it was. Now I've heard it's coming back. So like people are using cocaine again. I'm like, what? Why are you doing that? But they're like, well, we forgot how bad it was. So there's a cyclical nature to a lot of these things. Yeah, I think.
And that's, I mean, that was Abigail Schreier's sort of argument in her book on transgenderism, that younger girls were more susceptible to social contagion. So that's why, like in the UK and the United States, girls transitioning between age of 14 and 18 to transgender was up like 1,000 to 4,000%. And you just wonder, like, I guess I just wonder, prior to institutions and prior to all the technological revolution in the cell phone, because in 2012, I think over 50% of or the smartphone, 50% of high schoolers had a smartphone. I grew up in that. It was a complete disaster. Like it's not good. Like it's so beyond bad. I don't even know how to articulate how bad it is in these high schools and what kids are doing. And when I try to explain it to adults, to older folks, they like, well, when I was in high school, like, we did bad stuff. Some, like, they would like smoke cigarettes. It's like, no, like people are, it's way worse. It's like the most horrible thing is I'm not going to send our kids to public school. I don't know. It's the whole thing is bad because of the smartphones, like I wonder if these people are pathological who have these mental disabilities. Some of them like, what do we call them? Mental health problems. That's what we call them. If they are more, if they're better at using technology to spread the fringe into the center, and like because some of these people with these issues are very high capacity, very high IQ. And
let me try to answer this in a way, if I can, because it's a hard question. I can't really answer, but I will say this from the narcissism perspective. When we first started studying narcissism in social media, and this is 2007, maybe. It's been a long time. What we noticed, and this is looking at Facebook, but also looking before social media when people just posted their own websites and things, is that narcissism was driving a lot of the activity because social media was like, you got to be a TV star yourself. So the way I would describe social media to people was it was sort of built on ego. It's just like Bitcoin runs on energy and social media runs on ego because you need a motivation to post, and some of it's to get paid, you got to do it. But a lot of it's just people with egos. So that's kind of how they built these systems, was ego built it.
Yes.
But then what I didn't really consider was on top of that, what's going to happen, you're just going to get weird fringe stuff.
Yeah.
So I understood it would be like, well, the Porsche guys would all start talking about the guys that went to 1960s Porsches would have a group. But you also got the weird stuff and the real dark stuff that, I don't even want to talk about.
Well, like porn makes up the majority of the internet.
Yeah. Well, so basically you end up with a huge amount of pornography and violence. Yes. Because Freud was right about some things about human nature. And it's really, and it's dark and it's dehumanizing because it takes you out of life, by throwing you the sort of the most basic aspects of life, porn, violence, ego, whatever. It takes you away from your own life. You're sort of stuck in this fake realm. And so that was built on top of that network. I should say, actually, the original internet, there was a lot of porn before the social media, I should say. But
you had to go to the store and buy porn.
Like
everybody's like, you're weird, dude. Like maybe they didn't. I don't know.
No. Literally, I was talking to Roy Baumeister about this. I was like, Roy, when we were kids, like the only way we got porn is we'd read National Geographic. Go see some topless women in some island in the South Pacific. That was porn for us.
Sports Illustrated. You mean the
Sports Illustrated?
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It wasn't. I mean, what the kids. Anyway,
the type of porn, when you say pornography to old people now,
they're not thinking of the same thing.
They're thinking of like a Playboy magazine. They're not thinking of like violent visual videos of porn. Like they're not thinking of that. Unless you were like grew up in a house where somebody had like videotapes, and then you gotta be. But like, that
was like you had to be real
into
like
it.
kind of a fringy freak. It wasn't like a normal thing.
Right.
Like I wouldn't have run into that at my, Anyway, I think, the social media spreads stuff very quickly. You get a lot of contagions, trends and whatnot. It's just the nature of it.
And it's compounded with the culture, or I guess it's like, it's exponentially grown. It's fascinating because my grandfather, he was old. He died a week ago, and
sorry.
And we didn't know anything about him, really, because he was a very closed off guy. But then we read a bunch of his writings. And your class I was taking at the same time, the narcissism one. He was an alcoholic. There's a lot of stuff there. Fascinating. His life was very interesting, and I whatever. But we had these old tapes from their voice when you call on the phone on the old phones. You had to put a tape in. Answering machine on the old phone. Yeah. And we had so my dad found these, and he found a little recorder to play them on. And we're going back, and there's phone calls from like the 90s that are recorded on there. And it's like, I felt so weird because I got to grow up in the very end of social media, the very end of the world before social media was a different world. And my grandmother and my aunt, like they're talking on the phone with each other just about random stuff, like somebody's having a baby. And the inflection, their voices, they sound like happier. They sound like they don't spend all day comparing themselves to everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where you have this nostalgia. So I'm thinking in my head, that's just nostalgia. Like not like when I was prior to listening to these, I would think back and I thought that people talked that way and were happier back then because I was a kid, and everything seems great when you're a kid. But that's not true, dude. I think that people were actually happier back then. And
you just go look at the videos of high schools from the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
It's depressing though. I watch those it comes up on my phone, and it's like kids in like graduating class of 85, and they're all like, they look like they're like 37. I don't know, because they have testosterone and stuff. And they're like happy. They're like not totally depressed. You don't have, and that's why there's a disconnect when I try to tell my parents or my grandparents, like what high school was like for me. They're like, no. When we were in high school, it was great. We loved it. We had so much fun in the 80s. It was awesome. It was Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan. It's like, I had to deal with LeBron James. This is like, it sucks, dude. Like talk about narcissism. Anyways, that's a different conversation. But that is like, I listened to those tapes and I was like, this is what has happened. You can hear it in the inflection. You can hear it in the voice. And it's, I don't know like what to do about that other than like for my own kids to just try to.
Dude, you get married, you have some kids, you raise them well. That's all you can do.
Right.
Things change.
You think we're going to move away from that stuff though? Or do you think we're going to just keep going down that until I don't know what happens?
I think theoretically, just from the generation's perspective, we're going through the fourth turning, which is like a predicted major phase transition in how society operates, similar to the change from before World War I to after World War I, where we went from aristocratic and classy Europe to kind of modernity.
Yeah.
And we rode modernity for a while, and now that's wiped out, and we're moving into what's next. And I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I'm starting to get some hints of it, I think. And my sense is, I sometimes call this the Great Reset versus the Great Awakening. I get a sense a lot of people are going to go back and try to rebuild something try to find the earth, find the rocks, find the stones, and try the soil and rebuild something fresh again. And I think other people are going to be lost, just totally just zombified, dude, and just fry out. And we'll end up with a generation that's a lot smaller.
Yeah.
and but it'll rebalance, I think. Now, where I could be wrong, and this is where it gets scary, is when the population ages, everything designed for children becomes targeted to adults to keep them infantilized.
That's exactly what's happening.
Disney goes, not enough kids, we're going to market to adults. And Lego goes, not enough kids, we're going to market to adults. Yeah. Coloring books for adults. Dude. So adults are children, and then they die, and that's the last man. Dude,
you say coloring books for adults. My wife works somewhere that I'm not going to say, but they have a room in there for when millennials, because I've always blamed it on millennials. Millennials have like a mental health. They need like a 5-minute mental health. And it's like a room with coloring books.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Like, you shouldn't be in the workplace when my kid is having a difficult time, maybe we give them a coloring book, like refocus on the coloring book and then come back. You're 3. If you're doing that at 30 years old, my intuition says you should not be in the workplace. That's just what I think. Yeah.
I think that's just what's, we're just not growing up as quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of research on this, and some people just, I call it adulthood optional. Some people are just opting out of adulthood.
Yeah.
It's, that's where I get worried that it doesn't turn around, because it just can't.
Yeah.
So I can come up with a more scary story, but hopefully this stuff, things cycle.
Yeah.
And hopefully we cycle back to something interesting.
When you, and I realize that this has been really long, and thank you for doing this. I'll ask like one final question, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I do have to walk my dog.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah. Like when you're studying this stuff, like, and you're seeing, I mean, the data, the actual like cold hard facts of how people are interacting with things and each other, and how our society is like, in some ways being run from underneath, I guess. Like, so like when I'm looking at this stuff, I just get sort of not depressed, but I'm just like, oh man, this is just all really bad. And I totally agree with you. Like the main thing that I can do is I can kind of, like, I've got kids and I got a family. That's about it. And I'm going to do the best I can with them. And I'm not going to try to change the whole world, because that sounds like that doesn't even sound enjoyable. That sounds terrible. But, yeah, I get, like, I don't know. How do you just stay like hopeful? I don't know what word.
I really struggle.
Yeah.
I'll just be honest with you. I work out really hard. I'm going to walk my dogs right now, which I try to do every day. That keeps me hopeful. I go in the sunshine every day, even if it's cold.
Right.
I have a family. I try to love them.
Yeah.
Even when I'm kind of a jerk. And I try to stay as fit as I can be, even though I'm turning 60.
Yeah.
And take care of myself at that level. But I really struggle. It's been such a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of noticed, I was like, God, we're in a freaking spiritual war. I shouldn't say that as an academic, but during the pandemic. And
yeah, dude.
Yeah, it's a hard time. And it's like, but that'll burn you out.
Yeah.
And so you just got to keep yourself from burning out. You got to just keep the fire going. And you don't have to win. You just have to survive this.
Right.
And we'll get through it.
Yeah.
But what you're doing, settling down, having a family, like that's the best thing you can do. Like there's nothing you can do that's more important than that. Right. Nothing I've done in my whole life is more important than having my kids.
I find, it's great to have kids, because they think you're awesome. And like I am kind of awesome anyway. But it's like they notice in you what nobody else does, right? That you're so great and awesome. I also find comfort in reading old people, like really old people, like people before all of this crap that we're talking about, who just like live, or maybe who are in the midst of it, who saw it, like C.S. Lewis and stuff like that, but even older people and theologians and whatever, because I don't know, they had, G.K. Chesterton talks a lot about like the older people had older societies, they were more they were more engaging with the mysteries of life and the enchantment of life. And when you read them, Chesterton has an essay on like he forgot his newspaper in the bus. And so he looked into his pockets and found buttons and all pins and random things. And he wrote a whole essay about like the mystery and the magic and all of these random things. And it's very G.K. Chesterton. And that just is great. Like, it's like, because we're so materialistic and reductionistic in this society that I think if you can kind of reorient that towards, a magic or an enchantment.
Enchantment. Yeah. I think we've gone through the great disenchantment.
Yeah.
And I think if you can enchant your life, add some enchantment, I think it helps. And having kids helps because kids live in an enchanted world, and you could partake in that with them. You can partake in that mystery with them when you're, it's fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. And it is very fun. You get to read those old stories too again, which are really good. So that's great. No, this has been really good. And there's a lot of interest. I feel like, my wife was like, what are you going to talk to him about? It's like, I don't know, because there's a bazillion things. I mean, even narcissism at the center of it, you can explode out of that into all different areas of life. It's like, but at the end of your class, I was like, wow. We're all I'm a narcissist, like hardcore, because I feel like, and I got to work on it. I got to work on the bad. I'm like the bad narcissist a lot of times because I grew up in like, it was like you were incentivized to be a bad narcissist, and social media, all this stuff, like to just fly off the handle and say stupid crap. And like you get attention if the crazier, more insane thing that you say, you get more attention. And that was how and then you become like a Marxist where it's all about power. And it's like whoever can just say the most insane thing and dominate more people wins. And if you have a personality that's more in alignment with that, you feel like you're winning in life when you're actually just a loser and treating people terribly. And I feel like I have had to work very hard to erase that stuff, erase all that. So.
You have an ego for a reason. It's protective and helps you survive. It helps you get ahead, but it has these downsides because it keeps you from being able to connect fully and love fully. Mm-hmm. And so you're always having to balance, and it's always a project working on yourself. It's a practice.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not like you win. It's not like you're like, oh, I'm fucking perfect now. No, God's perfect. You're just doing your best.
Right.
And keep practicing.
Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. I'm going to go walk my dogs.
Awesome.